Hello. Today I'm going to do a tour of my PHP code because I did mine slightly differently than the way we were shown in class. So I started off with my index here and I set a root path variable which basically just sets up where my site folder is. And then I use that variable throughout the rest of the project to set up where to include things and all that. So of course my next step is include root path, and then I concatenate on the file that I want to pull, which is controller app.php. So I'm going to pull my controller file. Now my controller is basically just an app class, and we'll go over that in a minute. So back in my index, we actually instantiate the app class by creating a new variable called app and passing in the root path to the app folder, or the app class. So in the app class we have some private variables, and then we have this constructor function. Now this is what's called as soon as the class is instantiated, and it accepts one parameter, root path. And if you don't pass in a root path, then it'll set it to this here, which is basically just saying the root folder. So it's going to get the root path variable that we passed in back here, and it's going to take it and set this root path, which is our variable up here, equal to the root path that we brought in. Then we're going to use that to include, and we're going to include the model data class, which has all of our site data in it. So you use root path again, and then model data.php. Okay, and as you can see here, we have multiple functions that will return arrays full of data, and we'll get to that here in a minute. So we included the data path, we instantiate the data class, and then we set up the variables up here at the top will end up being set with these arrays that come back. So the arrays are returned and passed into these variables here, which we have one for metadata, icons, style sheets, scripts, content, and footer. So this is all of our site data is going to come back into these variables. So let's see what data we're actually getting put in. If you look at the first function, which is get metadata in the data class, it sets a metadata variable to an array, and that array has all of our metadata we need. First of all, it has header type, which we set to content type text HTML. It has a site title, which we set to my PHP site. Metalang, which is the language for the HTML tag, so we set that to English. We have charset, which we just set to UTF-8. Robots all, that's for things like Google's Spiderbot for search engines. And then we have keywords, where we set up PHP, MySQL, JavaScript, jQuery, Ajax, HTML, whatever the heck we need. So those are our site keywords, site description, site author, and last revision date. These are all things that are going to go in our HTML. So let's take a look at our HTML. We have a file here called meta.php in our view folder. And this just sets up the metadata for all of the heading information. And as you can see, we have inside the lang property of the HTML tag, we have this PHP statement. And it's basically just echo this metadata metalang. So it's going to pull the metadata tag or variable, and it's going to say, let's get a property from that array. And the property it's going to get is metalang, which if we look at the data class, you can see metalang returns en for English. So let's go back to the index. Now that we know how the app class and data class work, we're going to make our first function call, getHeader, followed by getBody and getFooter. Now getBody we actually pass in home because that's the first file we want to get is the home page. So we go back to the app class and we look at the functions for those. We have the getHeader function, getBody function, and getFooter function. Each of these functions will return us the display for that data. So the first thing we're going to do is set the header type, and we're setting metadata header type, which if you looked at the data class, header type is just content type text HTML. So if you ever want to change that, you can easily just change it in this class. And then after we set the header type, we're going to actually call the meta and header because we want to add those to our view. Now if you look, it says this get view meta and this get view header. That's because we have this private function down here called getView. GetView accepts one parameter, which is file, and it's defaulted to a blank string. Now when we pass in meta, it's going to set file to meta. And we're going to do our checks here. We're going to make sure that there's data in that variable, and we're also going to make sure that that path exists. So we're going to use root path view because it's inside the view folder, and then the file name .php. And if those are both correct, then we will include the path that we set above. So once we set that path, it's going to say, hey, let's go ahead and return the metadata. So it returns this meta class, which is then displayed to us. It also displays the header. The header just sets off the body and the wrapper, and then of course the header and footer push. So we go back to app and we see that we're done with the get header. So the next thing we do is we do the get body because we called that back here in the index, and we passed in the variable or the string home. String is then pushed into the string home is passed into the variable file, and we say get view file. This makes it so that we can dynamically change which file is being loaded while keeping the same metadata and header data as well as the same footer data. So get footer and get header are both going to be the same all the time because you're not passing in a variable, you're just saying get the footer, get the header, and get the metadata. But the body is going to change based on which web page you want to load. So you tell the getBody function which file you want to get data from. So in this instance, we're going to get home, which is home.php. Now, home.php just has a section and an aside. But if you notice, there are two PHP tags here. One is saying content content, and the other is saying content aside. So we're going to look at these. So if we go back to data, you can see the get metadata gets all of the metadata, and then we also have some other functions here. Get icons just returns your favicon. Okay, so if you look back at the meta HTML here, you can see that we have all the metadata being returned through PHP statements. But then we have this PHP block here that will do all of our dynamically added files so that we can change them and we can add more than one. So for each loops come in handy in this instance. We're going to do a for each loop, and we're going to check icons, which is an array from our app class. Remember, we set that with the array that's coming back from the metadata in the data class. Now we only have one here, and it's going to be returned here and passed into the app class. So when we go to the meta tag for this, it's going to say for each icon, we're going to set the icon path. The icon path is the data that's in the array. And as you can see, we just passed in the path for that icon. So it's going to say run this once because there's one icon in the array. It's going to set the relation type to icon, the type to image ico, and then the link is going to be icon path from up here. And then it's going to end it and then set up a new line and 2 tabs for formatting purposes. We're going to do the same thing for style sheets. We're going to go through the style sheets array that we passed in from the data class, and we're going to set the style sheet to style sheet text CSS and set the link to style sheet path. Now if we look in data class, here's your get style sheets, and we just have the link here for view style main.css. And last but not least, we do this for the JavaScript script tags. Now this one's a little different because we don't want this new line tab because it's the last script tag is going to new line right before the closing head tag. So for formatting purposes, we don't want that double tab there. We want it to show up where it is. So we use this variable I, which is set to 0. And then we do the for each loop. Now inside the for each loop, we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to echo and set up the text type of JavaScript in a script tag, and then use the script path. And we're going to change this to source. Okay, so we set up the script path, and then we also set up new line. Now we do I++ to increment the value of I, which means the first time this is run it'll go up to 1. And it's going to say if I, which is 1, is less than the count of this scripts, which is the variable, so it's going to count how many items are in this array. So if I is less than the number of items in the scripts array, then it's going to add the double tab to the end. If not, then it won't do anything. So the first time this is run, if there's more than one script tag, it'll add the double tab for that next script tag. However, for the last one, it will pass this over and won't add the 2 tabs. Now, when we get to the header data, we don't have any PHP to fill in yet. So nothing happens there, it just loads in the tags. However, if we go back to home, we have content, and content aside, which is where we were before. So let's go back to data. After getting style sheets and scripts, we're going to get content. Content is going to be split into 2 places at once, or at first. We're going to set a content tag, which is basically going to be all of our page data. So we just have some lorem ipsum here with a heading tag that says my app. And the second thing in this array is the aside. And the aside just has my script tags for my Google Ads, which I've added just to demonstrate that there's more to building a web page than just adding a block of content. So now we have a block of content, and right beside it we have the aside tag, which is our Google Ads, and we return the content array. This gets passed back into app, and then from there into home. So we're going to put the content into a section, and we're going to put the aside into an aside. The last thing we do is get footer. Now the get footer is going to call the footer PHP, and it's going to close off the footer push, use the footer tag, put the copyright, and it's going to insert the copyright data from the footer array, which if we look at data, we can see there's one more function left called getFooter. And we have a footer array, which right now only has one thing in it, copyright. Copyright is just set to this string. So, we go back to footer. After the footer tag is closed, we close off the wrapper, the body, and the HTML tag. Now, as for the design and style, we have a script folder and a style folder both inside the view. The script folder right now only holds jQuery. The style folder has main.css, which is called using the metadata, because as you can see here we have the style tag which links up to main.css. And then we also have our favicon, and then we have a couple of logo items in the image folder. So this is where everything is linked up at. And that is how the website is made. Now, if we go into the browser, we can go to my website. And this is what my website looks like. And just to show that my source code is nice and clean and well formatted, here it is. We have all of the content, we have the aside, and we also have the footer, we have all the metadata, and everything has been put in here nice and clean. And that's how you make my PHP website.